he was something like a violin maker. All violins are made the same way, from gluing and all the rest of it, and machinery. But some are better than others. This is what Morris did with the fly rod. He made them as perfectly, I guess, as they could be made. And he didn't make them for money, he made them for love. I think it gave him, not power isn't the word I want, it gave him expression. He could express him way like be Jesus Stokowski with his baton.
So I never really began to know Grandpa until after he died. I knew he had taken some home movies, but I had no idea of the amount or the quality of the film he took. And I probably wouldn't know him any better now if I hadn't accidentally stumbled across that 4,000 or 5,000 feet of 16mm home movies in the garage that day. That's what gave me the spark for this film. I knew he and Fanny had taken long vacations all over the world, but seeing the footage was like seeing a different man, one I had never really known. See, here was a man who never bothered to learn how to swim, and yet he spent half his life, it seems, on or near the water. And to look at that footage, to see the movies he took, it seems his life was on the water. Or rather, beneath it. Here was a truly dedicated man, so dedicated to his art, fishing, that he designed and built fly rods with the care of an artist. And he was so dedicated to striving for that perfection that he designed and built the machinery that he used to build the rods.
No matter what he did, he would put a full blast to it. Well, see, that's he was efficient in a way. Like if he was going to go fishing somewhere, he'd go where the fish were. Well, the first time I ran into him, he came into Paul H. Young Company where I was working, and we built rods there, and he came in and just talked about bamboo rods. And one day I was working on an old rifle, a Springfield rifle. I was converting it for myself, and he said, "Well, geez, why don't you come by my shop? I've got some little tools that'll take care of that real easy for you, you know." So I went over there, and well, we became good friends from then on. And oh God, he was, I don't know exact age, but he was over 60. But he was still a pretty darn spry, cocky little guy, you know.
It was pretty well known in the family that Grandpa wasn't the most social guy around, and he would snub people occasionally, mostly adults, and some of those people were his children. But to us grandkids, he was quite understanding and really a good grandfather. And whether we were really interested in fishing or not, Grandpa saw to it that all of us grandsons received a fly rod after passing some arbitrary age. I don't know what the milestone was, but at some point in my life, Grandpa hand-built a fly rod for me. And I certainly didn't realize then the quality of the piece of equipment he had built for me.
Yeah, see, even the smallest thing, he'd put as much effort as he would to the biggest thing, you know? Oh no, he had no use for people that were idle and wasted time, or weren't interested in it. I mean, he had to have the interest in it, and then he'd go along. He'd tolerate people and try and learn them a little something, but he didn't put up too long if he didn't see any hope.
He was always quite anxious to explain any technical detail of fly rod making. I remember times I'd go back to the shop at his house, and I'd ask him a few obliging questions, and he'd oblige me with some answers, but I never really came close to grasping the technicalities of what he was saying.
This piece of cane, once I've cut it out of this larger diameter billet, roughly to a 1/4 inch square, depending on what size rod we're building at that time. We'll put it on that template. Now, the template will travel underneath the cutter. Now, of course, when electricity was hooked up here, this table would travel by itself. When it got to the far end here, we'd pick the stick off of the template, and we'd have a stick with the 60-degree triangle on it as such. And that's a compound taper, which gives the action to the rod. Now, this machine, basically, Morris made most of this gearbox and this table, and once I create a template, which sort of is really creating the rod, I have a drawing and I keep that template, those dimensions. Or I could take anybody's rod and duplicate it too. You know, I have an indicator and I set my template in there, and I try and maintain 1/1000th of an inch. Now, of course, this probably after gluing and things that might change a little, but I start out with that. I generally end up with a rod. Sometimes it just comes out right on the button. Oh yeah, this is what's called Tonkin cane. It comes from an area in communist China now, which is north of North Vietnam a little bit, and it's the only place in the world where this particular quality of cane comes from. Well, what we are doing in this operation here is turning a ring off of this nickel-silver tubing here, and the ring's the reinforcing ring that goes around the top of the female part of the ferrule. You know, the ferrule, that's the connector, the joint in the middle. And it's something that's got to be pretty precision and pretty durable too. Well, I don't know, you could probably add up somewhere around 50 operations, you know, counting the hand operations like that straightening and stuff like that. I never did count them because it'd probably scare me, you know, but yeah, I would say, God, it must be somewhere around 20, 30 hours, even with the little bit of production I have in the way of machinery, you know. So there's no big money in it, you know, you gotta like to make them.
Some of my very fondest memories go back to Twin Lakes, the cabin that Morris built near Sheboygan. It was such an idyllic spot. And I wanted to go back and see what it looks like now, because Grandma sold it after Grandpa died, and it still stands, unused, on one of the most beautiful small chains of lakes in Michigan. Being there and having nothing to do, that was the big thing. And for all the hundreds of hours that me and my dad put in fishing out on Twin Lakes, we never caught one fish worth keeping. It was only on those rare occasions that I went fishing with Grandpa that I ever caught anything worth keeping. And on one of those few times, he really showed me what kind of a man he was. Anyhow, we were out on the lake fishing, and all of a sudden we were deluged. A sudden downpour, thunder and lightning, the whole bit. So I started to row. I was plugging away against the wind, making absolutely no headway, getting us no closer to shore, when Grandpa says to me, "Move over, let me take it." So I moved over, and he started rowing faster than I had ever seen a man move in my life. We pulled the boat up on shore, and I turned to him and said, "Gee, Grandpa, that was pretty good for an old man." Well, I guess I was pretty lucky to have lived through that. Oh, he knew he was old, but he didn't act old. And he sure didn't feel old.
And from there, I think about the next thing we did, we took a trip to Lake Nipigon together and spent a week up on Lake Nipigon, just him, me, and the Indian guide. Oh yeah, we had a funny incident happened out in the lake. He made a spoon called a Kush spoon. So he made that a long time ago, quite a long time from what I could understand. It was always a hobby that he kept in one corner of the shop, and in between jobs he'd work on the dyes. The original Kush spoon with the lightning flash had a zigzag on it. That was what it was, one of his prides. That's what we used to catch these big brook trout, or coasters, as you call them when they live in the lake up there. And so anyway, we're out in the darn lake, and we run into these two other guys after being out there a couple days who were camped down shore from us a couple miles. And we've been catching fish quite regular with this. And these guys, they just seem to be grumpy and madder than hell, you know. So they're madder than hell anyway, and they ain't got any fish. We come alongside them, and we had a few fish, and I think we caught one right in front of them, and the guy hollers over, "The hell you catching them with, you know?" And I think I hollered back, or said, "Well, Kush spoons." And the guy hollers back, "Well, what in the hell's a Kush spoon?" Right then, Morris, he was kind of setting down low in the boat. It was really windy, and there was a spray flying all the time, and he was kind of bundled up there and setting low in the boat, and then he popped up like a jack in a box, and he hollers back, "How in the hell are you going to catch a fish if you don't even know what a Kush spoon is?" Well, right then I thought we were going to have a fight on the water, you know, and pretty soon the boats, we got closer together, and I picked up a few Kush spoons, which we had just boxes of them, naturally, and threw them over to him. The guy immediately puts one on, and it was just like a stroke of luck, or somebody was watching over us, but the first cast, this guy caught the only fish he'd caught in a couple days, right in front of us. And so we became pretty good friends after that. Apparently he had something going for it, because it worked.
Oh, I think it'd be a pose. I mean, I don't say a fisherman is a poet going around. There's ego, there's chase. It's a form of seduction, really. So, once in a while, you got to catch the mermaid, you know. Well, let's get down to Morris.
All right. Well,
I've written a good deal of this, but I've got to repeat it. You know, I mean, there's only one more story, and it's the one I know. I think we met when he wrote me a letter. And I think it was, well, I beat around. I think it was a fan letter. He said, "I'm a fisherman too, and I like my story or book or whatever it was he read." And he said, "I'm going through to Montana fishing, and I'd like to drop by and say hello." So, geez, one morning at the Imperial Bar, we're playing four-handed cribbage, and in walked Grandpa Kushner. He looked for all the world like an old, retired Irish railroader. And I took him into this old beaver dam, and there was a trout rising. Said, "It looks like a nice fish." He said, "Yeah, it does indeed." Don't know if he called me judgy or not. It does. And I said, "Well, if you want to try for him, you can, there's a ford up above." Well, he said, "Why not from here?" "From here," I said. There was a cast, I'd guess about 70 feet, and not much room for back casting. Brush and all that. Well, he said, "I'll try it more." And so, anyway, he tried for it, and he laid a fly over the fish. But he got action on an incredible cast. I said, my God, what kind of a rod are you using? He said, one of my own. Oh, what do you mean, one of your own? You bought the blanks? No, he said, I made the thing from scratch. He said, I got the machinery, I made the machinery to make the fly rod. So I said, would you mind if I tried to see if I could cast halfway with your rod? I cast across there. It's an incredible cast that I made, and I am no fancy caster. He made a presentation ceremony. Judgy, your rod. What? You know, I went into ecstasies of refusal, grabbing at it. Yes, he said, you like it, the cast well, it's yours.
Morris Kushner came here as a boy from the oppression of Russia, adapted quickly, and at an early age joined the throng of immigrant workers in this new country. When he was quite young, he chose as his life partner a beautiful girl with much spirit.
When he was a young guy around Detroit, you know, courting her on the Harley-Davidson motorcycle. Of course, she blushed like a girl to hear him tell this.
In those lean years of the Depression, he provided food, housing, and clothing for his growing family of 4 children. And where others held back, he plunged ahead, taking the calculated risk of embarking in business on his own. The gamble paid off and provided him in later years with hard-earned, well-deserved leisure.
I think the big thing about his rods that might have expressed him, they were beautifully and perfectly built, I'm told, by people who know rods. Well, I've got an old fishing friend called Hal Lowen, and he said there's no rod made like the Kushner rod. No, Leonard, the whole bit, English, the Hardy, no rod, because they didn't have the machinery that Morris knew how to make. They had a lot of power. I've been trying to tell you how, I mean, it's, after all, it's a little wand, it's a fairy wand, a small light fly rod. But he also put this power in.
Like I say, probably know hardly much more than 2 of his rods were ever the same, because he was always trying to experiment and get as many new ideas in here before he died to start with. He accomplished probably what 3 men would, 3 good men would do in a lifetime. There was no doubt there's supermen in this world, and he had to be one of them, you know.
And his expression, this was his way of I guess, expressing himself. This is the artist came out, making fly rods.
So looking back at the Morris I knew, or thought I knew, comparing it with the Morris I've just discovered by approaching this film in this way, by looking at his home movies, and by talking to the men who knew him, and reading about him in the different pieces that have been written, I think I can understand where he got this strange dichotomy of personality. He was truly at home only in nature, and all the other roles he played were merely that.